The week started off with mourning as a tragic accident claimed 11 lives at Impala Rustenburg, and while that has reanimated the issue of mining safety, it accompanies bad news of sector layoffs amidst a commodity downturn, which means falling prices, and a cocktail of depressing factors. How are these convergent dysfunctions impacting economic growth and the jobs outlook? We'll talk to Wits political economist Dr. Lumkile Mondi. Good evening to you, Dr. Mondi, and welcome to the program. So we often report, we see these stories as separate and standalone events, but they are deeply interconnected and threatening to the economy. We used the mining example in the intro, but this also extends to the port inefficiencies and backlogs which are raising costs. The breakdown of the country's rail network resulting in moving goods by road, adding another cost. Then there's load shedding, affecting productivity. I mean, we can just go on and on and on. Share with us how you are reading these singular events together.
I think it is important for us to locate these developments from the pre-1994 political settlement, where the ANC, together with business, agreed about the economy. Fan and Rastomje have historically argued that the South African economy is a minerals, energy, and finance complex. So we're seeing here the destruction of the minerals infrastructure, part of that complex. Secondly, the energy, of course, we've seen it being destroyed. So what we're seeing basically is a continuation of the deindustrialization of South Africa, with the minerals and energy complex being destroyed as a result of, firstly, the political settlement that you agreed to, where the mining sector, particularly led by Anglo-American, had agreed to the ANC under Trevor Manuel to go offshore. So we saw Anglo-American in the mining sector and many others listing in London. We saw also the financial services, part of the MEC of Finance Rastomje, companies such as Old Mutual, Investec, going also outside. But more importantly, in the unbundling of the conglomerates, many of the industrial infrastructure that had been built by the apartheid regime, by people like Van der Bijl, Jan Smuts, Van Eck, and many others. We saw those agreements also being shattered, because what many of these companies did was that they basically sold off all these by unbundling. And in doing so, there's an interesting study done by Nimrod Zak titled "Things We Lost in the Fire," meaning that things that we lost in fire, as insurance and real estate, because that's where the economy has gone. Our economy has shifted to finance. In that process, destroyed the very fabric of the apartheid economy, and in doing so, the jobs, infrastructure, and of course, the ANC government has perfected it, a two-state capture and corruption.
And I use that word deliberately because that alone is a lecture series on the trade-offs that were made and the consequence of those trade-offs. The reality is that the die is cast in many ways, Dr. Mondi. So we sit with the situation where I think what you're saying is that this is the resultant collective effect of all of those decisions, which have now led to the kind of neglect, and you talked about the continuation of the deindustrialization in South Africa. The trouble is we also see ArcelorMittal considering winding down its long steel products business. We know that there's reduced steel consumption because of infrastructure development project halting, I mean, a range of different things. VWSA is looking to foreign markets because we simply aren't able to provide stable power. There's port congestion. Do you think that there would be, akin to the falling of dominoes, a contagion effect of this kind of deindustrialization and destruction across the different sectors, the way you see in a game of dominoes?
Absolutely. If we don't have a new political settlement where the state, business, and society agreed to a new developmental path for South Africa, focusing on growth and protecting the poor, I think this light is going to continue. We all know that part of the destruction of key infrastructure was the result of the state capture. And therefore, that lied on government. We also know that the choices that were taken economically, particularly in relation to black economic empowerment, and many of those BE in the infrastructure spend under Minister of Finance, Minister Gordhan, and President Zuma, that those BE were supposed to be players in the energy, in the railways and other areas of economy, imported quite a number of key equipment at the expense of white-owned South African businesses who basically lost business because the state was not giving them those opportunities. And we know that we've got very little to show for that expenditure. So therefore, what we've seen is that many of our successful and very skillful companies in the construction sector are gone. Basil Reed, Group 5, and many others are gone. In the rail sector, many of the suppliers who were key to General Electric are gone. So this is really a crisis which requires a political settlement.
Right, Dr. Mondi, but in that story is the transformation story. In these 3 decades, there should have been substantive, credible and sustainable development of black business who would be able to provide that kind of support in being able to be big construction companies, lay down the rail network, take over within that space of a vacuum. So why aren't we talking as much about that?
So those blacks were skilled, were capable. In fact, one of the companies I chair called Tele Rolling Stock and Leasing, we never got to see any of those deals. So those who are politically connected got to see. And today, there's no capability in the country at all. And hence, they're all coming back to us to ask for assistance and ask for us to play a role. So what I'm saying to you, Imam, is that if that process of transformation had led to skill formation and capability, then we'll be having a very strong black-owned company in South Africa, employing highly skilled black individuals. There's none of that company at all. 30 years down the line, you look at Petri's company, he's done very well as an individual. So there's very few black-owned companies where you see that blacks now own their companies, they've got capital, they can drive an agenda. We don't see that at all. So where did the money go? That's the question. And we all know that a lot of the money went to lifestyle. So really, the transformation project has been implemented, has been a disaster. So we need to recalibrate and look at a new political settlement whereby we bring in white businesses, we bring black entrepreneurs, bring the state and society to focus on putting South Africa first than putting individuals in the rebuild program, because that is where the problem has gone, is that we focus more on ourselves and forgot about there's a nation to be led. There are people that were left out under apartheid and have continued to be left out, even under a democratic regime, despite a very progressive constitution of our 1996 agreement.
Well, you've answered my what would have been my final question, Dr. Mondi, about where the opportunities lie in turning it around. Thank you for your time and your analysis tonight. What we do know, and everyone can agree on, is that we are in an urgent period in this country for things to give, and for the kind of turnaround that you're proposing to happen sooner rather than later. Wits political economist, Dr. Lumkile Mondi. On that note, we will take a look at the latest coming out of the sports desk, and here is Xoli Zondo.